Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's edition of the ThunderCast. Hope you're all doing well. Just going to check real quick to make sure everything is smoothly operating. Looks like it is. I'll go ahead and introduce, as always, my co-host. Let's start here with my good friend Couch. How you doing, Couch?
Good. How are you doing, Lio?
Doing all right. How about you, Marmaduke?
I'm doing all right. I'm more educated on what actual big cats are, thanks to my participation in the ThunderCast. So I appreciate always learning animals at the zoo's names that I forgot. So looking forward to my next lesson today.
Glad to hear it, bud.
Oh, I got a lesson for you real quick if you want one, Marmaduke.
Okay, all right, teacher.
Okay.
I want to learn. Is it about lions and tigers and bears?
No, not about bears. I mean, we don't talk about bears. Bears, they got trouble.
Oh, my.
Yeah, they got trouble. But what is the biggest cat that can purr?
I think we lost you there, Lyle.
What do you know what the biggest cat that can purr is?
The biggest cat that can purr?
I think I know this one. I'll let Marm go first, though.
I'll go with a bobcat?
Nope. How about you, Couch? You want to take a guess?
I feel like it's a cheetah.
Nope. It is oddly enough a mountain lion.
Oh, that was my second guess.
So pretty much the record of me not knowing anything about mountain lions continues, right?
Correct. Let's see here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start our conversation as always. How's it going, Rory? How's it going, Nightshade? Hope you guys are doing all right. Going to have some more content here coming to you guys this way here very soon. But wanted to go ahead and start this off. We're going to talk about three things this podcast. We're going to talk about Cheetara, the character. We're going to talk about, of course, the episode The Ghost Warrior, a personal favorite of mine, and the Wildstorm The Return issue number 3. So, Couch, would you like to give us your thoughts on the character of Cheetara?
Yeah, I would. This might come as a bit of a surprise, but for some reason, as a kid, I was never really too attached to her. I think that's because I actually started watching the episodes out of order when I was younger, because I wasn't, around when they were airing on TV, so I started with season 2. But now that I'm rewatching the series as an adult, I can definitely appreciate her as a character a lot more.
What do you like about her?
She's just kind of that strong, independent woman vibe. You don't want to mess with her kind of thing.
Strong, independent women, huh?
Yeah, strong, independent women.
All right, I'm going to move on to Marmaduke. What do you think?
I also think she shows weaknesses at times, and I won't get into it because we'll get into it when we talk about the episode, but even when things like her psychic powers show up, she'll show some vulnerability, she'll show some fear. So yeah, she has that strength to her character, but she's not like a robotic automaton that just knocks things out of her way. She has a specific skill set that makes her an important part of the team, and she has other things she's not as good at. So I just appreciate that she contributes something to a team effort.
Right, and I think those weaknesses kind of make her feel like a more realistic, believable character, so I can appreciate them.
Well, that's all good to hear. I just want to go ahead and get some confirmation from the chat real quick, just making sure you guys can hear us right. Can you guys hear us? Let me know. All right, so my thoughts, I've always enjoyed Cheetara as a character. I can't really think of many Thundercat characters as a whole I'm not really all that fond of. I've talked about a couple of them before. But my thoughts on Cheetara is I find her to be, especially when we're coming up in the middle of the 80s, like, we had 83 started with He-Man and all that. Cheetara never really fit the standard quota of your typical girl when it comes to, or even a woman when it comes to animated cartoons. Usually they're portrayed very Princess Peach-like, or they're the annoying sister or the annoying girlfriend. Cheetara is literally none of these things. Cheetara gets captured about as often as the guys do. Matter of fact, I think the guys get captured more often. She has bailed them out in multiple situations. She is a very confident individual, and she doesn't sit there and take grief from anybody. She'll throw it right back at you, and sometimes she'll just smack you in the mouth with her giant stick. Now, concerning Cheetara as a character in the book Hear the Roar, again, I recommend getting it. This is what it says. Originally intended to be named Cheetah I'm very happy they changed that. The series' leading female protagonist appeared in 117 episodes. A central member of the original ThunderCats team to leave Thundera in Exodus. She played a crucial role. She played a crucial role team. One word. Oh man, editing error here. A crucial team role and was framed for her incredible speed, agility, and telepathy. Though her ability to see visions through her sixth sense were indistinct early in the series, she slowly began to exert a greater control over them in the show's second season, which is true. Her special trait is speed, explained Leonard Starr in an early show notes. In action, she is virtually a blur, except when slow motion is desired. In these cases, her antagonist can be shown in extreme slow motion while her movement can seem to be at normal speed. Her voice should be very feminine, with an element of purring in it. Somewhat like Eartha Kitt, I approve. The animator's design sheets for Cheetara are notated with the following comments. Her weapon is a magical staff. She takes off the staff which is attached to her left arm with a magnet. It is no longer than her fist. However, when she flexes her hand, it telescopes into a long, multi-purpose weapon. She can fight with it, pole vault with it, or use it as a spear. Her specialty is that she can throw it by spinning it, and it flies into the legs of her enemies and trips them. When her use for it is complete, she need only flex her fist again, and it reduces back to its original size. Now, we've seen, of course, extending poles in various fiction. One big one that comes to mind is Goku's power pole from Dragon Ball, as well as Chat Noir's pole. Now, with the way technology has innovated itself since the 80s, you can literally get exactly what Cheetara has. A tiny little compact pole that you hit a button and it extends to a full-length pole. I wouldn't recommend hitting anything with it. It will bend. It's made of aluminum. But they do exist now. It's very interesting. And I like the fact that they went into detail about how it attaches. There's a lot of forethought that goes into this that a lot of people don't recognize. Case in point, I would think that Cheetara's weakness in terms of her exhaustion actually plays into the fact that she's based off, of course, a real-world big cat. So I'm gonna give Marmaduke a little bit more of his desired big cat education here.
Boy.
All right, so Cheetara in the Anointment Trials, it stated that she can only run for so long before she can no longer maintain her top speed. That's directly tied to actual cheetahs. Cheetahs can only go so fast for so long. And the reason why that is because their brains, if they do not, will overheat and it will kill them because of the extent of force put into it.
Wow.
Yeah. So
hey, teacher, I know something about cheetahs. Don't they use their tails to maneuver around a little bit better?
Correct, they do, but do you know why?
Man, I'd have to guess based on balance, right? Like if you can twist your tail like opposite direction you're turning, wouldn't that help you like angle and turn around on a quicker dime?
Yes, but there's another reason. Number one, if you actually watch slow motion video of a cheetah running, its head stays level with the ground. It does not bob up and down like anyone else that would run or any other animal. And the reason for that is because their shoulder blades are not attached to their spine.
I didn't know that.
So if you look at a cheetah head on, if you were to remove all the legs via Photoshop or editing or whatever, it looks like a literal torpedo just going straight for whatever it's going at.
Huh.
It's actually kind of wild. So
that's an interesting visual.
That's why the tail rudder is so important for the cheetah when it comes to maneuvering, because trying to pivot on anything else won't give it much momentum. But that's probably one reason why her telepathy and telekinesis would wear her out so much, just tied again back to a cheetah's real-world properties. However, in the second season, she lost that inherent weakness. Very directly and very stated so in the episode, The Telepathy Beam. Really good episode. I highly recommend watching it. Do we have any closing thoughts on the character Cheetara?
None that I can think of.
I noticed the voice actress seemed to have a lot of fun, like making risque comments in the voice of Cheetara. Is that something that you would know? Maybe you would know this, Is that something she would do like throughout her career, like on the fan circuit and things like that?
She doesn't do much in the way of fan circuit. You got to keep in mind, Lynn Lipton is she's getting kind of up there in age, and I think she's more of an introvert compared to Larry Kenney and Peter Newman, just based on the interviews I've seen and how little she appears out in the wild. But there are two outtakes in media that are just, and I mean like literal outtakes in animation, that are well known throughout the animation community. Number one is ThunderCats, and number two is Berserk. And because with ThunderCats, they're the reason why, according to, what was his name? Wally Wingert, according to Wally Wingert at RM Transcon 2002 or 2003, he said the reason why a lot of places don't put out their outtakes to the public is because of Thundercats. Because in some cases it can break the illusion, and there are things that are said on the studio floor that'll get people in a lot of trouble if the studio finds out about it.
Yeah, can't appeal to the suburban moms if you're famous for dropping a lot of F-bombs, right?
Yes, I mean there's literally a little audio clip of the voice actor for Snarf cussing, like a full stream of him just cussing, and it is the amazing and most hilarious part of that entire thing, in my personal opinion. So
I need to rewatch that. I haven't seen it in years.
You should. It is great. There's also a little clip on YouTube of the last episode being voice acted in, and where Earl Hammond is going on his mum-ra spiel. He's like, "I must do what is right for me," and it pauses and it cuts out, "Mother." Yeah, and they record the entire thing. It's fantastic. So
now I haven't heard this one about Berserk. So is this the English dubbers, or is this English the Japanese voice actor?
The English dub. It is. If you look up the outtakes, they're some of the funniest things, man. They're great. But we're gonna go ahead and move on. If nobody else has any more comments about the wonderful character of Cheetara. And we're going to move into the episode, The Ghost Warrior. As always, Couch, why don't you go ahead and give us your thoughts first and foremost?
Yeah, of course. I really liked The Ghost Warrior. I can see why it's one of your favorite episodes. It was just a really engaging and intense plot, I thought.
And what do you think about how they introduced the character Groon?
I thought Groon was really cool.
I wish they would have done more with him.
Right, yeah.
Any thoughts on the story itself, different characters in it, how it's constructed, anything like that?
I'm gonna go ahead and pass that question to Marm.
Ooh.
I'm just gonna feed off of that.
Right. Well, boy, I dig this episode too. So maybe one thing that stood out to me is kind of mood and build-up, right? So this one opens with like the thunder and lightning, cracking over everything. Mm-hmm. And when Groon's in the Thundercats lair itself, there's like this whole section where he's just like messing with their heads a bit. So I kind of like the build-up of, them trying to give, Groon some intimidation factor before any fight takes place. The second thing that stood out to me was how well written the Vulcans were. Like, I really like the line, "It's wrong, but well, let's see," right? Because that's such a like real life way of giving into peer pressure. And I thought the characters were handled well. And then maybe the third thing is, I think this is really interesting if you compare it to who was it? The goat, the satanic goat who gets big. Mongor. Okay. Yeah. When you compare this to Mongor, there's this similar theme of like unearthing an ancient evil, but it's a complete flip on some of the tropes. I think that they were very aware of like having like, a set of stock, these are cartoon adventure story plots. Like everyone does a Trouble with Tribbles episode at some point in most cartoons. So it seems like they're taking like these kind of basic cartoon plots, but they're finding ways to make them fresh. So if Mongor starts in media res, this one starts a little bit earlier on with the great mooding. If Mongor, it's the Thunder Kittens who are responsible for releasing him. In this one, it's these little Vulcans who are responsible for releasing Groon. So I really like the idea of just taking a basic plot and then giving it some, fresh twisteroos. And you mentioned this, I wish Groon got some more attention. There's still this thing where there are several points in this episode, maybe we can talk about this, where it's implying some interesting stuff about, how does the Sword of Omens work? Can the Sword of Omens not work on a Thundercat who turns evil and turns against the Thundercats? Why did Groon get absorbed by the Sword of Omens at the end? It's like all of this really interesting stuff that maybe would be fun to debate about. But it's clear like the writers aren't worried about like giving us like 90 minutes of here's all the details of the way the magic works in this world,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't really like about this episode, I thought it was a little strange that the two Balkan guys were, they're explaining who Groon is to Liono. They're kind of like, oh, he tortured this planet for centuries, and I'm not really sure how exactly that would work, just given the Thundercats timeline. So, I'd kind of like to hear how you would kind of justify that, if that makes sense.
Okay, so here's how I'd roll with it, and here's how I think they were going for. The first episode, you see them having to head to Third Earth and do it in the suspension capsules. Sometime before any of that happened, Grun was already banished from Thundera. He went the long way, right? By the time Grun had arrived on Earth, centuries had passed between then and the ThunderCats arriving. So there are ways to explain it. I don't think they really thought ahead to do so, simply because they didn't know what they were going to do with the character. I also don't think it's that the Sword of Omens cannot harm a previous Thundercat. I think it can. I have a personal fan theory about it. I think the Sword of Omens ultimately relies on faith. Liono didn't know what he was dealing with, so he didn't know if the sword would or would not work. We see in later episodes that the sword has no problem slapping Groom right across the mouth. But in this, it's a complete unknown. They've literally never been attacked by a ghost before, much less one that literally knew who they were. So
Right.
I think,
and I love Liono's response to the whole ghost problem. What do you do when you get a ghost? You fight it with another ghost.
I also have to say I love Panthro's reaction. It's stronger than Panthro. Stronger than me!
No.
Especially when he gets thrown from the control panel. All right, who's the wise guy? Because somebody's catching the hands tonight.
Yeah.
I'll do more than budge them.
But
I love how the whole ThunderCast team was so ready to just deck a literal ghost.
I mean, they tried. If you look at it, every single one of them at least tried something, and that shows that maybe they are a little bit weirded out, but they're gonna try. They're gonna try to at least attack him in some way, shape, or form. But I think the world building. Go ahead, Marmaduke.
Also, from a writing perspective, I think you got to see every single Thundercat fail to try to handle Grun.
Yeah.
Sometimes in meaningful ways, like Wily Kit, tries to throw something at him, and she inhales her own smoke, right? And then her and Wily Cat get trapped in the fire, right? Right. So it's their own bag of tricks got turned on them. Panthro felt like he was stronger than him. I don't know. For Tiger's a little bit harder to pin down, but it's kind of like he can't. The thunder, the cat's lair is Tigra's design, right? And then Grun's able to play with it. So almost every character, there was some way in which Grun toyed with them or attacked them at their strongest point.
Absolutely. Now, were I writing it, I'd probably have Tiger like, what are you talking about? There are no such thing as ghosts. Tiger, it's right over there. Nope, that's not real. It's an illusion.
I'm not looking at that.
Nope. But I think it's really interesting how much detail they actually do pay attention to a lot of things. If you've ever either paid attention to the people who tell stories about it or they've had to deal with it themselves, there's a hyper amount of detail put in. What is it? Loud noises they don't know where it's coming from. The room gets cold. Doors open on their own. They are playing into every single known ghost trope in this episode, and they're doing it very cleverly. They're doing it with enough to inform the reader or the watcher what's going on, but not enough to actually scare children, which is a definite plus. The fact that the Balkans show up, they see a tree get blown apart by lightning, they go down, they find this grave. And we never know how Grun died. We don't know if the Third Earth inhabitants just locked him in there and prayed for the best, or if somebody had finally somehow found a way to kill this monstrosity and bury him away and seal him away. But they notice all these talismans that are for protection and guarding and all these other interesting things. And I don't know as much about paganism and all that. My friend Patch probably be able to tell me what these things mean, if anything. It might just be jumbo. But it's interesting how they play it, because this isn't just some random guy. He's free after all these centuries, so he knows the passage of time has gone on. And the first thing he sees is, wait, something from my home planet that I haven't been to in centuries is here. I'm going to investigate it. And when he does, he takes down everybody in a way only somebody with absolute confidence would do. And when the Thundercats try to attack him, Liono's straightforward. He tries swinging a sword at him. You can't hit a ghost with a sword, so that didn't work. He's stronger than Panthro because he's a saber-toothed tiger. And he's able to dick with Cat's Lair. He turns the kittens' tricks on themselves. And Cheetara, of course, was one of the first people to step in, and that didn't work either. And he just mocks them. Then he goes on a rampage. The Thundercats don't know what to do. They've never dealt with this before. But when the Balkans and the Wallows come to them, it's like, well, we don't know what, but we're going to do something. So they still set their minds to try and figure this out, right? So when you look at the linear timeline, they're sitting there and they're doing what a smart group gets together and does. They sit there and they brainstorm. All right, Here's this unknown factor. It knows who we are, but we don't know who it is. So, what's the assumption here? All right, well, I've got this magical sword. Well, maybe the sword can tell me something. Well, the sword doesn't have psychic powers.
Oof.
But what they do is they use that very clearly to say, well, somebody here does. Now, the interesting thing about this, it might be, I don't know if it's considered a plot hole, but all the ThunderCats' powers do come from the Sword of Omens and the Eye of Thundera. So I don't think it's less of the fact that the sword is incapable of doing it in this case, so much as it is sometimes you've got to find your own way and not rely on the magic sword on your hip. And Cheetara had to grow as a character. So Cheetara finds out Grun wasn't just some random dude. Grun was a ThunderCat, not just any ThunderCat, Jaga's BFF. And what happens? You see a long play here of real, very human issues. The Balkans, why did they rob the grave? Because, and I quote, times are hard. It's probably not in their normal... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and then one of them makes the statements, we're not evil, we're just poor. Which, yeah.
So that's something everybody understands. And no viewer watching that's like, oh man, these greedy little Balkans, they're just trying to get... No, it's clear that that's not their nature to actually go tomb robbing or any robbing. They were desperate. And especially in the middle of a thunderstorm, why not at least get some shelter, right? So
right.
You see that, and you see this other human issue going on about trying to overcome their adversity, trying to deal with the unknown, and it just plays into everything else. And then we go into Grun. And Grun, he has a very human problem too. Greed. Greed overcame Grun. He has the opposite issue of the Balkans. The Balkans were looking for treasure because they were poor, and they had nothing. Grun, at that point, the only person whose station was higher than him was Jaga. But he was still greedy. So he gets his marauders together, tries to pillage Thundera, gets completely and utterly wrecked and shot into space. And now he's back as a ghost, and he's terrorizing people. He forms a club through Thundranium. Again, I have no idea how that would get explained away. I don't know if Thundranium only weakens ThunderCats by the fact that they're anointed characters or whatnot, or if it's just we didn't think that far ahead. But
yeah, he dipped his hands into it and grabbed it. So
yeah,
huh.
So I don't know if it just... Go ahead.
Well, what if that has to do with you getting cut off from the ThunderCats? If you're cut off from the ThunderCats, you no longer... I mean, I guess he shares their strengths because he's still able to dominate a planet, but what if you lose, like, I don't know, if it's mystical, you could lose access to both the strengths and weaknesses of being a ThunderCat.
I'm thinking that's a possibility, but with the strength thing, Grun still has his unusually powerful strength. So it's something that probably wasn't thought too deeply into because they were still trying to establish the lore and world building. And don't worry, guys, I'll get to your questions here in a minute. But then what do they do? Well, Lion-O has a friend who is a ghost that knows this guy. So the minute Grun shows up and literally starts knocking on the door like, yo, come out, fight me IRL at the Chuck E. Cheese. They all come out, and Lion-O's like, well, how do you fight a ghost? Wait, with another ghost. So they literally use the sword to pull Jaga out of the astral plane to throw down with this other dude who's got beef. And it's a fairly well done fight, especially for the 80s when you had a whole bunch of censorship to worry about. And it's in this case where Lion-O starts really taking his role as Lord of the Thundercat seriously. Because what happens is Jaga starts getting weakened by the Thundranium, which I'm still confused by because magic, whatever. And what he does the only time he's ever done it in the series, he gives Jaga a direct order. He's like, Jaga, as Lord of the Thundercats, I command you to take my strength. And that's how Jaga's able to get the upper hand. Lion-O takes charge. He takes responsibility. Now, what I think is really interesting is Jaga is known as the Wise, right? And Grun is a powerful warrior. And what happens is once Grun is defeated, he tries to appeal to Jaga's righteousness. He's like, well, literally using the word repent, would you scorn a friend who repents the evil ways? And honestly, Jaga's answer was correct. He wouldn't. So when they go to shake hands, Grun, for some odd reason, grabs the Sword of Omens and tries to strike Jaga with it, and the sword kablooies him back to his grave on Third Earth. You don't see him being tossed back into it, but you find out later on that's kind of what happened because of other things that happened later on. And what Lion-O is told by Jaga is something that has always stuck with me, and this is one reason why it's one of my favorite episodes. It's not so much the fighting, it's not the lore, it's because what Jaga says is so very true. Better an honest enemy than a false friend. You must learn which is which.
And what was interesting about that is Grun wasn't even an honest enemy. So that it's sort of like you get to see the complete fall of this character from someone who would have been, like if you had lived in his age, you would have thought that Grun was like this magnificent, figure. There would be legends told about this character. He'd have been a hero of the realm. And then not only do you see him reduced to an outcast and like a scoundrel, you see him even lose honor even as an enemy.
Absolutely. Now, I have my own theory here because I'm going to go a little on a tangent of my own. Here's the thing. In, Return to Thundera, I believe. It was either Thunder Cubs or Return to Thundera. I think the latter. Part 3. Mumra summons Grun to the pyramid. And when Grun appears, his response is, Mumra, what do you want? So they clearly know each other. So my theory is, and I know that some official information has contradicted it, they said that this ancient sorcerer on Third Earth somehow knows about a sword light years away from him that's magical and powerful. Well, how did he know that? Well, the official text in the Hear the Roar book says, of course, he learned it through the power of his pyramid. I think a more logical assumption would be, since they clearly knew each other, you don't think Grun would tell him?
Oh. That is an absolutely galaxy brain theory. I 100% support that now. Oh my god.
It explains why he has not complete, but limited knowledge of the Thundercats and how they operate and what their weaponry is, because you got to keep in mind, the Sword of Omens was not something the majority of Thundera knew was a real thing. Even in the pilot, it was cut from the television airing, but in the uncut original release you can still find on VHS, Tigra's comment was the Eye of Thundera. I thought it was myth, legend, because to the people of Thundera, they have no clue. But Grun would, because Grun is friends with Jaga, and that was the blade Jaga used in battle. So Grun's knowledge of what the sword is capable of is going to be incomplete. So if he tells Mumra what it's capable of, and Grun goes missing or dead or whatever, and Mumra still wants it, he's not going to know it will never work for him, because Grun wouldn't know that. If the pyramid was able to give him all this information, why that key piece? Why that one piece of information? There's a lot of serendipitousness there as opposed to a logical train of thought, but that's just my personal opinion here. But I'd like to go ahead and read off what the book says about all this. If an episode of Thundercats can achieve perfection, the Ghost Warrior must surely come close. As with any piece of animated television, many individuals and disciplines are required to come together to form the finished output. Because of this, it is not uncommon for one production element to outshine another. With the Ghost Warrior, every single facet of production is on top form. The script is exciting and enticing, the animation and direction superb, the performance is subtle, the music is selection sublime, everything comes together to reveal Thundercats at its best. First, Leonard Starr once again shows his writing proficiency by mining the very mythology that he helped to create for the series' inception. We see our first glimpse of Thundera since the series' pilot episode, and the return of Jaga in a predominant role would surely have excited his audience, also representing a rare occasion where Jaga can be seen by anyone other than Lion-O. Starr's sense of humor is also on top form, like with some great dialogue, like Panthro's response to the invisible hands of Grun the Destroyer. As Marmaduke said, "I'll do more than budge them." He continues to imbue the series and its characters with added layers of personality, and we learn that Cheetara has a unique gift as a visionary. The standard of animation in the Ghost Warrior is also impeccable. The subtle lighting effects throughout are spectacular. These include Grun's reveal at the Cat Slayer and the reflection of fireworks on the Thundercats' faces during Jaga's battle with Grun. Each unparalleled in cartoon animation. At the time, that was 100% true. Even the editors seem on top form with some great use of the music and effects library. And there's some brilliant vocal performances that show how skilled the team of actors really were. The idea of a rogue Thundercat is inspired in every twist and turn of the plot, from Grun's discovery by the terrified Balkans to his epic battle with Jaga, are perfectly paced. As a further bonus, there are even flashbacks, and the rich backstory of Thundera, which sits at the core of the series, is never utilized better than by Leonard Starr. If any episode could be guaranteed to solidify Thundercats in the daily consciousness of young children, it is undoubtedly The Ghost Warrior. And here's the writer commentary from Leonard Starr. A lesson had to be taught in each episode of ThunderCats, and I finally decided that attaching a moral to a story once it was written was too tough. So I start with the moral and write the story around it. One of my favorites was an honest enemy is better than a false friend. There you go. You got a story there already. So I did the episode from that point of view. Having a backstory is important in storytelling. The thought that the Thundercats came from somewhere, that they didn't just spring out of the ground as Thundercats. Most characters have a backstory, and sometimes it's just implied, but other times you go in and have flashbacks and that kind of thing. And that's where he left that. And I think it was a fantastic story from beginning to end.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and address some questions in the chat. Rory Rhymes, I got a question for you, Lio. Rumor going that the Thundercats will be made into a movie. Do you believe it will ever make one? Unlikely. There was a pitch for it back in 2007. You can still see the test footage on YouTube. It is terrible. The concept designs were horrible. The script for it was leaked, and the script was terrible. A little bit of an insight into the script. They were going to turn Groon into Mum-Ra. So, yeah, they actually scrapped that because they went ahead and put forth money to do the 2011 series. And since that failed, and this new one's going to more than likely fail, I doubt there's going to be a movie, and I'm okay with that. And the reason why I'm okay with that is because ThunderCats is one of those properties, like so many others, I think should stick in the realm of 2D animation, and some clown wants to do it in live action. Now, let's see here. Zentron. Why did Thundera get reformed? It got reformed because of the gyroscope created by Jagara. And I think actually the second season of ThunderCats, clearly it's not your cup of tea, but I think it had a lot to say and a lot of good to it too. But yes.
Oh yeah, I remember the gyroscope, the thing that broke literally every other episode.
Well,
for some reason.
Well, the thing is, like when it aired, especially in reruns on Toonami, when the Thundercat community was first getting started online, they were trying to figure out, well, how did this happen? And I'm like, they assumed that Mum-Ra did it. Like, Mum-Ra doesn't have that level of power. If he did, the Thundercats wouldn't have been an issue. But you literally have someone in the center of the planet named Jagara who has an actual gyroscope that holds it together. Wouldn't reason dictate that if the planet's coming back together, it's because of said gyroscope? So, there's that answer. Now, any other thoughts on the Ghost Warrior before we go ahead?
Oh, yeah, you missed a question. I don't know if it's directly related to the Ghost Warrior, but you missed a question from Stormblitz, I think.
Oh.
Stormblitz wrote,
yes.
I always had a question. Why was his staff given to Cheetara in the original anyway? Just wondering that.
I think they're primarily focused on what's often known as bludgeoning or blunt force weapons, as opposed to a bladed weapon. The Sword of Omens gets around this, of course, by having lasers and lightning and all that. But I think they gave Cheetara a staff because it's an effective weapon. It is good for long range. And it's good if you don't have a whole bunch of physical upper body strength. As opposed to Panthros nunchucks, which, although I do like nunchucks, they're literally a peasant flail. And if you're able to hit hard, you're able to do okay with them. But a staff, I think, is a little...
yourself in the face pretty hard with one time.
Ooh.
That hurt.
Yeah, that'll happen. But I think it's a more elegant weapon and just goes better with her general motif as opposed to any other weapon you could give her.
I'd add that it's good for mobility too. Like if she's going to be running around at top speeds, right? It lets her run around and pole vault. So I think it's always good to combine something that works with a character that lets a strong character. Think about how a strong character would use that weapon as opposed to a lightweight character, that kind of a thing. It's great combos, and they're really good at I think composing scenes and having interesting stuff happen with the characters' different strengths in ThunderCats. That's one of the things that most surprised me about it. I was kind of expecting like cringy 80s action, and it's very understandable action. It's action that makes sense for the characters.
Yeah, and actually the fight scene between Jaga and Gruen is actually one of the better choreographed fight scenes of 80s cartoons. They have to be careful, of course, because again, using a club and a sword, and these are not exactly the kindest of weapons for children's choreography. So while they never contacted body parts, the form and techniques they were using, specifically Jaga with the longsword, were very well done overall. There was only a couple of instances where myself as a bit of a nitpicky person who's done Hema and Kinjitsu would look and say, nah, that ain't right. Most of it's actually very solid, especially when you're trying to get this point across here. When you're able to hit the dude's weapon so hard it starts glowing hot red, I think you're doing all right.
Right, yeah.
All right, so any other questions from the chat before we head over to the final topic of discussion here? Let's see, Panthers Nunchucks got cut from the UK screenings. Yes, they did. The reason why that was is because the UK, in their brilliance, decided that nunchucks were too violent. They did that not only to Panthro, but also to Michelangelo. In fact, after the 4th season of Ninja Turtles, the original cartoon, all Michelangelo uses is a turtle lariat. He doesn't even use his nunchucks anymore.
So let me get this straight. They didn't have a problem with a sword. The literal guns mounted on the Thundercat ships and their enemy ships, but they got mad about 2 sticks on a chain.
Yes. Their reasoning is because you can make nunchucks easily at home.
Gotta get my chain. Gotta get my blunt, heavy pieces of wood.
That I just have on hand.
Together.
Well, in fairness, I did try as a kid, and you can make them, and they'll last all 30 seconds. The minute you're like, I'm going to spin these fast, it goes flying and hits the window, and then Mom's pissed.
When I was in 8...
ask what you made them out of.
A broken in half plunger handle, and I think some yarn.
Nice.
When I was in Taekwondo, they'd have like nunchucks, but they were covered in foam because it was starting to during the time I was in Taekwondo, like everything got more and more like padded and politically correct because they were afraid of someone suing them. So when my brother did Taekwondo, they just like beat each other up. And then by the time I had left, like helmets were required and chest pads were required. And the nunchucks were foam, but I remember the cool nunchucks were foam, but they had an actual chain on them.
Yeah, I used to do Taekwondo too. Did your chains make like a really awful noise when they rattled? It just sounded like really plasticky and awful.
I wonder if I still have them. I don't know. I didn't like spend a lot of time like comparing chain sounds, but I think it was kind of like a cheap metal material, so probably wasn't a good like Jacob Marley rattling his chains to scare Scrooge kind of sound.
Well, I've got like 3 or 4 different pairs of nunchucks somewhere around the house, so
I think I still have my old ones, but I have no idea what happened to them.
Mine aren't foam because I don't roll that way. Go hardcore or go home. All right, so into the final topic of discussion here. Let's talk about Wildstorm, the Return Issue 3. Marm, why don't you lead us off?
Sure. Well, I've kind of been like... I've agreed with the premise that they shouldn't be doing a story this dark with Thundercats, but I've kind of been taking the position that, I'd like this story if it was just a little bit more balanced. And this was maybe like the point where I was finally like starting to get sick of it and saying, all right, now I'm so sick of the grimdark. I see like the dark, greasy hair hanging over the writer's face and like the tattoo that says no life. We live in a society. Right.
We live in a society.
Oh God.
Gamers rise up. That's my favorite part of Thundercats was when Mumra turns around in the comic, looks at you and goes, "Gamers rise up."
Gamers rise up.
And it's not sophisticated. It literally has Mumra like laughing evilly and looking into the crystal ball and saying, "Aha, part of my plan." You're not cool just because you've got a lot of like X-rated hints in addition to a really cheesy Saturday morning cartoon plot.
My favorite part about Mumra in this issue is him pretty much just gossiping with the Thunder Kittens about Lion-owned Cheetara immunity. He's like, ooh, she's gonna be mad. This is gonna be great.
I bet he'll hate you forever. Yes, in fact, I am pretty sure about that.
Oh,
you are totes in trouble, girlfriend.
I missed the last 3 seasons of Gossip Girl. I must catch up.
I wish they do like. I wish they'd like go full hog and like make him a comedic scenery shooter. Sure, like he must be bored ruling the world. So now this is the closest thing he has to soap operas. Silent slave, I want to watch my stories.
Oh my God, you guys' Mumra impersonations are gonna kill me.
Oh man, so I hate this issue. I hate it so very much. It's I say this is honestly the worst Thundercat story I've ever read. And yes, I do rank it lower than the He-Man crossover they had a few years ago. I hate it. I hate it so very much. So very much. I don't like the grimdark. I don't like let's be honest here. For those of you that are having issues, there is a trigger warning here, so be ready. Implications of rape, sexual assault. These are things that do
Right.
not belong in ThunderCats.
Yeah,
That belongs. Go ahead.
there's certain boundaries you really shouldn't cross with children's licenses, and I think that's one of them.
Absolutely.
Did I mention the Lost meme last time? Like that was the problem with the Lost meme, is that Control Alt Delete was this silly little like, hey gamers, Legend of Zelda. It's hard, am I right? And then he does like a miscarriage episode, and then it's back to hey gamers. How about those Republicans, right? They don't like violent video games. Da 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 da.
Oh.
You can't have those two. You can't have that dramatic a tone shift. And all of Thundercats' Return is way too much of a tone shift. Is creating whiplash. And every time I see a story like this, I think, well, how would I do it? Like, is it possible to kind of break down the Thundercats and like have them, to show Mum-Ra more evil than he's ever been before? And I think that. I think Couchboy's nailed it, is that there are just some things you can't do with a children's property. You could have a really dark story with children's characters, but there are things you can't do with these characters without kind of unmaking sort of the charm of them, I think.
Correct. I completely agree. I think that everything is sitting here and they're saying, oh, how do we use Tiger's whip? Ooh, ooh. It's just, I'm not going to tell you the secret of my... Why would that even be an issue? Why are there pages dedicated to that conversation? It's
Right, yeah.
Tiger's whip works special for him. Not... It's so dumb. Did they even think when they wrote any of this? Oh, we're going to take Cheetara. We're gonna turn her into the mutant sex slave because... Aren't we dark and edgy? Please like us, kids?
Please,
okay.
Look at the boobs and forget your troubles, children. Don't worry.
The one thing I liked was the idea that under Mum-Ra, even the Plundarians would be miserable slaves. Everyone is a slave. It's kind of tapping into like Darkseid and Apocalypse in DC Comics, where the only thing Darkseid cares about is Darkseid. The best you can hope for is to kind of placate Darkseid a little bit and be given some authority over other slaves. But you're a slave of Darkseid, even if you're his greatest general. You'll be tortured. You could be killed for no reason. I think that's a very powerful idea for representing evil in fiction. I don't know, I almost wish the whole thing was that. Like Lionel comes back and he sees what it looks like if Mum-Ra is ruling, and you can still like bring. Oh, the other thing I hated was Cheetara slapping Lionel, because if the whole point is like she's strong and she's not being broken by her captors, you would think that the whole reason why she wouldn't be broken is that she has confidence in the return of Lionel. I hated that. That felt to me like a breaking of the character even more than like the gross like, hey kids, X-rated stuff.
Well, there's also the fact that Cheetara's entire rant doesn't make much sense. There's a reason why Lionel has to go through the training that Jaga and Claudus didn't have, because the Thundercats are dealing with a character or characters that the Thundercats never dealt with before then. There's also a major... Go ahead, Couch.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. After you.
Oh, okay. No, I was just going to say that plus her whole kind of unfounded hatred of Lionel just seems really... immature for her character. It doesn't fit well at all, and I think it kind of undermines her a lot.
Very much so. It turns her into a token victim character. But there's also things that they didn't really make much sense from. Even going back to Reclaiming Thundera, it's never explained how the mutants came back. Last we saw the mutants, they were on the Captain Bragg circus train. Mum-Ra never talks about freeing them. And now... he's somehow able to also circumvent the laws and legislation of the planet Plundar to bring in a whole bunch of other mutants. None of that's ever it's just glossed over. They didn't think any of this through. All they did was say, we got a really dark and edgy story, guys. We're gonna bring the Thundercats into the 21st century with violence, nudity, and gore. Nobody thought this through. This reeks of the same problem that the Injustice He-Man crossover does. It's written like a 15-year-old that's writing something he thinks is mature. But it's not. It doesn't touch on mature themes. It just puts in a whole bunch of shock value because, oh, we can do this now, aren't we cool? And that's going to be a continuing issue. Thankfully, we only have 2 issues of this abomination left before we can move on. Do we have any other closing thoughts on this issue?
I might push back a little bit. I think it touches on mature themes. It just doesn't do anything worthwhile with those mature themes, and that's almost worse, because if you're gonna touch on it in a way that serves the tone of a narrative, and just respect what came before, and you can honor that legacy, even if you take it in a slightly different direction than it was before.
Absolutely. Aaron Sparrow actually talked about this, and I've said it probably several times in different ways. He says, when I'm given characters to write for, I don't see it as my chance to write my story with somebody's characters. I see it as a chance to write a good story with someone else's characters. And you have to respect what came before.
He's a gift to comics, Aaron Sparrow.
He is.
Lyle, did you ever get a chance to read The Duck Knight Returns?
Dude, I read all of his run on Darkwing Duck.
You read all of it. All right, so you're more of a real fan than I am. Yeah. So the Duck Knight Returns, I couldn't believe it. It not only is it a continuation of this character's legacy, and it's a good send up of The Dark Knight Returns. He managed to bring in, like these great themes for this kind of like fresh kind of Darkwing Duck story that still feels consistent with the legacy of what he built on. That's a writer with actual talent, looking at a property and respecting a property enough that he wants fans of the original to look at it and say, this is what I cared about for the original.
Absolutely.
I want to support everything he does. I hope that Disney brings him and Silvani back to finish their Darkwing Duck.
Why can't we get him on a Thundercat book? That's what I want, because I know he wants to work on one. He said it a few times, that and He-Man, and I think he'd be perfect for it, because he knows how to honor these things.
Change.org and I guess at Indiegogo, right? It can't be Indiegogo. You've got to actually get Thundercats on board with it.
Change.org can't do nothing. They never have. Instead, I'm just going to go protest outside the buildings of Warner Brothers and tell them to fight me IRL. But anyways, concerning the return, I made an announcement on Twitter. I'm going to go ahead and make an announcement here. I want to do a large fan project with Thundercats here. I want to rewrite and redraw the entirety of the return and make it not suck. So I know Couch is on board. I have to get together with her about it. I haven't decided yet if we're going to go with a different artist each issue, or if we want to have it to where it's a continual line of the same artist to keep that cohesion. But I'm getting some groundwork down now. But just so you guys are aware, we're going to need people like, I plan on handling the writing myself. I'll probably need an editor. And we're going to need like a good letterer. We're going to need a colorist. And we're, of course, going to need an artist. So here's the thing. I hate asking people to do things for free. I do have every intention, and I am going to pay people to work on this project. They're going to have to be negotiable. We're going to have to talk about it. But this is something that we're paying for. And by we, I mean me. So
can I audition? Can I audition to play Mumra in the motion comic version?
You can absolutely audition, but it all depends on how well you can get to the deep baritone, my friend.
All right.
I'll go out and get myself a really bad cold, and then I'll try.
But that is what I want to do. I would like to do a larger term project. I think we can handle it a lot better with the knowledge we have, and make the story not suck and not filled with a whole bunch of edgelords nonsense.
Intriguing.
Indeed. So I made that post on Twitter. You can scroll down, find it, and share it, and have people get in contact with me. I've had Couch and somebody else get in contact, but the other guy I've got. Go ahead.
You know what else? You might be a good person to kind of like help. I don't know, touch base on this. I'd be really interested to see a reanimate project for Thundercats. Now, the thing about some reanimate projects is it's really hectic and crazy, and that's part of the fun of it. I've seen them do it for like Kirby. I've seen them do it for like old Looney Tunes. I just kind of like it's my favorite kind of meme, because it's just people creating like their own unique spin on like an old animation, and it feels like a really beautiful tribute to me. They usually seem to pick one that's kind of meme worthy. So I don't know, maybe the Garden of Delights would be the most meme worthy episode for something like that. But I'd love to see a reanimate project for Thundercats. Well,
that would be interesting. I've only seen 2 reanimate projects that I've actually been fond of. The Dover Boys, which is a great one. Yeah. And the Deke Sailor Moon redub project or reanimate project was actually very well done, especially in the sense that what it showed was that the voice acting actually wasn't bad. Is that we were early on in dubbing and it just didn't work with the visuals. So when you watch the episode again in this reanimated style, it works a lot better. Of course, there's a reason for that. It's because in any form of animation, Japanese or American, they do voice work first, and then the animators animate. But with dubbing, you got to do it not reverse, and it never really works quite perfectly. But that's the announcement I have. But there is one more thing here. Next ThunderCast is going to be a little bit different. We're going to cover another character the next episode of ThunderCast in the next issue. Not next month, but the month after that. Next month, I'm going to be having some special guests on here. And, of course, you two are welcome to join me if you want to, as always. And we're going to talk about the Thundercat toy lines, specifically.
Oh.
I'm going to have... go ahead. I'm gonna try to bring on Michael and Melinda from Retro Blasting and my old buddy Joe Amato. I'm bringing Joe on because he is very versed in the original He-Man toy line, and he can tell me a lot more intricate details because this dude, what he literally does for a living is modifies and makes custom He-Man action figures.
Wow.
Now, that's what we're doing next month. Again, if you guys want to join us, you're welcome to. If you don't, enjoy the month off.
I'll communicate with you about that because I'm weird in that I'm like an adult fan who never like gave Thundercats the time of day until my 20s, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe I could be like a layman's perspective. So I'll just be in like communication with you about that behind the scenes.
Awesome. Rory, which Thundercat would I be? Oh man, depends on who you ask. Honestly, I've had some poor delusional people that tell me I'm more like Jaga, which worries me very much so. I think honestly the one I would identify the most with would probably honestly be Panthro because I'm old and I'm angry.
That's you know what that's fair. That's 100% fair.
I mean, you would think I would go with Lino, and he is my favorite character, but I think I'd identify more with Panthro because again he's old and he's angry and he's just tired of everyone's nonsense. Don't you touch his tank. And yes, Zentron, Joe actually used to be one of my co-hosts here. He stepped away because he didn't think he had much to add. I disagree. I think Joe was fantastic to have on, same with Tyler. But they both stepped away to work on other projects, and good Lord, they are on so many. How's it going, Jeremy? Glad you could make it. We're actually about to wrap up here. I'm really sorry, man. We have any more questions or comments from the chat or the crew here? Any other thoughts about Thundercats as a whole while we're getting ready to close out?
Were you asking the chat or were you asking us?
Both.
All right. Well, I have had a lot of fun roasting the heck out of the return with you guys. Like, this was my first time actually absolutely hating it. So for me, this one was a lot more fun because it dawned on me just how irritating this would have been to a longtime Thundercats fan when this was first coming out.
Oh man, when it hit, everybody was pissed, and I think they still are. They're just not. Yeah. They're just more pissed with other things going on right now.
We're kind of rekindling the flame with that a bit. I think with this podcast.
Got to stoke that fire. Got to stoke it hard. Because when it comes to authorial intent, like, and this is something I actually came to. Hold on. Which episode would like a digital reproduction of? We'll talk about that a little bit later, Zentron. What Marmaduke recommended was a reanimate project where you bring multiple fan animators or. Whether it be professional or individual project animators on, you reanimate an entire episode or something. Multiple people animating different sections. There's a Shrek one out there right now, which I'm surprised that so many of these reanimate projects, they don't just get copyright struck to the pit and back. But going on to what I was saying, I went to the mall yesterday. I don't tend to go to the mall, but I needed casein. I needed the vanilla flavor for my gains because huge quest. And I decided to go into Think Geek, and I went into Hot Topic. And I'm looking around, and I'm thinking to myself, I remember when nerd stuff was a lot more niche, and it wasn't as easily accessible. And I noticed why that is. It isn't because being a nerd is a popular thing now. It's because nerds have money to spend. And part of the problem with this is these companies just dole out so much stuff, and there's no heart to it. That's why they can make reboots that aren't even closely faithful or concerned with original authorial intent. And I think that comes down with the fact that corporations are ran by businessmen instead of creative talent. And as much as people want to give 80s cartoons griefs, the truth of the matter is back then, they let creative people do what they could within the confines of the limit system given to them, whether it be by the FCC or by provincial law or whatever, that's what gave birth to a massive cartoon media empire in the 90s and then stretching on. To be as blunt as I possibly can, you guys that are our 2000s kids like Couch Boys here and other people, you wouldn't have had Avatar The Last Airbender without He-Man.
Right.
And while that sounds like a stretch, when you look at it wide scope, linearly, it is factually correct. Because the money pumped into animation in the 80s brought about the animation boom in the 90s, which carried over to inspire more people in the early to late 2000s to create better things. In some cases. I think Avatar is one of those lone cases of a better animation project. However, that's part of my issue here. When people do reboots now, they're not so concerned with the original concept. They're not so concerned with the authorial intent. They want to tell their stories with someone else's character or reinvent the characters completely. And sometimes that can work, but more often than not, it doesn't. And what I mean by that is when you look at, say, the 2011 ThunderCast series, and I'm not trying to down any of the fans of that show. You're wonderful people. I wish I could talk more about the series, but I don't have as much information about it. One of the head writers, Michael Jelenic, went on a live recording. Somebody was interviewing him. I think it was at Comic-Con. And he said how Thundera, Third Earth, and Plundar are all converged into one planet in the original series, but he doesn't know anything about the original series, and statements like that prove that. He didn't have a heart for Thundercats. He says he did, but I think the problem with characters like this is because they like the concept, the idea. They don't like what it is. And
I feel like even if I was asked to reboot the Thundercats, like kind of like in a corporate way, I feel like I'd have to, even if it wasn't my thing, I feel like I'd have to know it enough to get the appeal of it. So even if in the act of reinventing something, I'd want to capture that a similar appeal, or speak to a similar kind of person as the original. I wouldn't want to just if I couldn't just like continue the old thing, right, and keep making stories that are set in the same universe with and say like this is literally in continuity, this is literally a continuation of their story. I'd at least want to make something that I could hold up to the original creator and say, sort of, thank you for creating this. Here's what I've added to it. Absolutely.
And in my case, were they to ever give me reins of a Thundercat series, because so many of these people have long since passed, I can't show that to them, but I can honor it. And part of the problem is there's this mentality, because people don't understand how the animation industry nowadays works. Very rarely when it comes to a reboot does somebody say, hey, I've got an awesome reboot idea. Usually in-house, they'll approach somebody they think is competent. I saw somebody mention the Netflix She-Ra. That's what happened there. They approached Noelle Stevenson and said, hey, I want you, this is DreamWorks, I want you to conceptualize a new She-Ra cartoon. Now, I've heard some very negative things. I give the She-Ra cartoon a little less grief, but at the same time, I will be addressing this in a full-length video at some point. It's okay, but it doesn't really work as a She-Ra reboot. I think there's a lot of heart there. There's a lot of care and imagination for the animation medium as best as they possibly could, or for storytelling, especially interpersonal relationships. That's what I'm seeing a lot of. But it doesn't really work as a She-Ra cartoon. But a later example is we have these people who think that to work on a show like this, the network expects or obviously hires people who know and care about the property, but that's not the truth. Back in the mid-'90s, actually when Toonami came out, there was a show called The New Adventures of Johnny Quest. It was the CGI 2D animation version that came out in the mid-'90s. And according to Lancelot Folk, who worked on the second season, the guy who put forth the first season, who was the main guy behind it, hated the original Johnny Quest. Hated it to death. And because he hated it, and because art is expressive, it made the first season of that cartoon absolute dog crap. So when Lancelot was hired on, Lancelot grabbed it, turned it on its head, and it was a fantastic cartoon after that. He also did several episodes of the show SWAT Cats. Lancelot is a fantastic writer with a lot of artistic integrity that unfortunately you don't see very often anymore. So that's what you're looking at. You see a corporation that's hiring people based on what they think is their merit, with no real concern with the original authorial intent, because these people aren't here to put out a good rendition of ThunderCast. They're here to get money out of a project for an IP they own. And that's what's going to wind up killing things eventually. While I generally have no problem with the concept and execution of capitalism, corporatism will kill everything. And it will kill it because they do not function off of creativity. They function off of meeting a deadline. And that will kill a creative person's desire to do anything, and it runs them off those projects. So that's my deep philosophical view on all of that. I'm probably bored everybody to tears over. Do we have? Let me see. I'm going to go ahead and address the chat here. I heard that. What?
What? I was listening, teacher.
I didn't like the way you said that while looking at your icon there, Lio.
If you could make a ThunderCats movie of your own, what would the hero's journey be of the movie? I'd try my best to not fall into every single trope that all these other people run into. I try to make it more human. And I think that's part of the problem is we have all these fantastical characters and they don't operate intelligently like a normal human being would. They don't emote properly. They don't reason or think things through. They don't react like real people do. They react like somebody's conception of a hero does. And that has always bothered me. I want the core honest integrity of a real human being. So that's how I'd probably try to subvert that a little bit here. Let's see here. Doing a reproduction to class episode, Friendship. That sounds fantastic. Hopefully it'll be done sometime soon. He-Man crawled so Avatar can run. Less of a crawl. He-Man did the best it could for the budget it had. And one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is in the 80s there was so much restriction to what you could and could not show in a cartoon. Even up to Batman the Animated Series, you could not actively show a fist contacting a face on children's television. Let's see.
Wow, wait a second. I feel like I saw Batman punch.
Watch it again. You'll see a fist fly, you'll see a splash of color, and then you'll see the guy fly away. Or his body go limp or whatever. You don't.
So the whiteout sensor, right? So
yes.
They use the white flash. Okay, that I knew about.
Yes, but there are things that you could not show. And they actually did a picture of this for the Batman the Animated Series, I think Blu-ray release and a tell-all book. There's an image where it shows everything you cannot show in a television for children. You see broken glass, strangulation, nudity, punching someone in the face, drugs, guns, major violence, stuff like that.
Now, you kind of gotta see, like, it's sort of like the history of watching like the Batman animated series universe. It's sort of like the history of them finally getting to push back on some of that and find ways to sneak it in. Because I know that they had like Tommy guns like really early on in Batman, and that was kind of unusual. Like it was really weird for a cartoon to have machine gun fire in it. Did they just like get a special exemption because they said, hey, it's the 1940s or something?
I think it was more to do with the fact that it was Art Deco in general, and also the fact that the guns never hit anybody.
Yeah.
The Cleaning Lady. How can you hate Johnny Quest? It's a quintessential young man's cartoon. A boy, his friend, and his dog going on adventures fighting bad guys, and not a single girl to spoil his fun. You can hate it by being... You can hate it by not having any imagination and thinking this show's garbage. I'm going to do it better than the original guy. That type of arrogance never works right. Zentron, by that time, I believe, specifically that episode, because that was several seasons into Captain Planet, the way they showed it was not as grotesque as one would think. There were restrictions removed later between the mid-90s to late 90s. There are things that you would... And yes, sometimes things did slip past the censors, believe it or not. And people didn't get chastised for it or whatever. Usually, the response was, well, if we get one letter, that means we got 1,000. Also, I don't really know exactly the extent on Captain Planet. I don't remember if it was aired primarily on local channels or if it then went into... or if it started at network television like TNT. Thank you, Rory Ryan, for the $2 donation. You're my first ever super chat person, so congratulations for that.
Yay!
Yay!
Rory Rhymes!
Monies. That'll go to one artist somewhere.
Cool, my $2.
Give me my dollars back. I need them for the coffee machine. All right, so any other closing thoughts before we head on out of here?
I don't think so. At least I don't have any.
How about you, Marmaduke? I know you're always thinking of
I'm
something.
having too much fun.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and cut it loose for now, guys. I hope you guys take it easy, and we'll see you all next month.
See you guys.
Catch you later.